on this evening's City Sikhs Recipes for Success 2020. As many of you are probably aware, if you've been following City Sikhs' various events across the calendar this year, City Sikhs is an award-winning Sikh charity which strives to build a cohesive and inclusive society in which individuality is respected and diversity celebrated. And it's within that backdrop that we host today's Recipe for Success series, which is a long line in this particular event, and I've been involved in it since 2015. City Sikhs always puts these calendar events on as a space to provide a connection for people to learn, to contribute and to share, and most importantly, to support people in developing their professional careers through networking and mentoring. So this panel discussion seeks to showcase individuals who have reached, in our view, the very pinnacle of their respective professions and their disciplines. Since 2015 that I've been chairing this panel, I myself have heard all of their formulas for success, and I've been really inspired as I've recycled that formula to overcome my own personal and professional challenges. We've had speakers that have straddled the financier market, from Barclays Bank to Deutsche Bank, JP Morgan and Lloyds. We've had professional advisors on the panel in the past from BDO, Optima, Norton Rose Fulbright, journalists from the Times News and Sky. We've had authors from best-selling personal development books, governmental and non-governmental organizations, members from parliament, and most notably, I remember sitting on a panel with a negotiator from the Israel-Palestine dialogue. And all of those panelists in the past who follow a heritage of like-minded panelists like we've got today, shared their formula and their antidote to personal and professional success. And there's been one difference this year than we've had in the past, which is we typically get together in an auditorium and we have an opportunity to not only hear speeches, but also ask our panelists questions. And I'd invite you to do the same this evening, even though the format for this evening's event is slightly different. We've got a chat feature which you can use at your disposal to ask us questions, but I also want you to sit back and enjoy the pearls of wisdoms that will be shared. I want to just speak very quickly before I introduce our panelists one by one, some of the journey that I've personally been on as I've been listening to the Recipe for Success showcase over the last couple of years. I transitioned myself from an international corporate lawyer at the end of our very first panel discussion to a non-executive director sitting on the board of an asset management company. And most recently, I transitioned to the CEO of a travel and tourism company. So my own professional success is very much down to some of the formula that I've picked up while I've been listening to this series over the last 5 years. So turning now to the panel to commence this evening's debate, I want to introduce them in turn and allow them to give their formula for success. And at the end of it, I will open up an opportunity for you, the listening audience, to ask some questions. So Sushil Kuner is our very first panelist. She's a lawyer at Gowling WLG, specializing in financial services regulation. She's got a particular interest in financial technology and was recognized, and this is very important for those of us who are in this sector, as a key lawyer in the 2020 edition of the Legal 500's FinTech rankings. That's quite an accolade for somebody to achieve in their professional career. Her clients include household names ranging from some of the largest car manufacturers to banks and e-commerce platforms. She regularly represents her firm as a speaker at a wide range of external conferences, and she appears as a commentator in the media, having authored a number of articles and books in her area of specialism. I will ask Sushil to give us her recipe for success before moving on to the other panelists and giving you an introduction to them one at a time. Sushil, over to you.
And hi, everyone. I'm honoured to take part in this panel today. And when City Sikhs first approached me about the speaking opportunity, it gave me a chance to really reflect on my career to date. Looking back, I've always had an interest in law. At school, I dreamt of being a lawyer in a big city firm. Perhaps that was some extent fueled by my love of movies and films such as The Rainmaker and A Few Good Men. And I'm really proud that I've managed to realise that dream today, although financial services regulation wasn't exactly what I had in mind when thinking about a career in law back in those days. So what, I hear you say, why does that make me a success today? Chet has kindly highlighted some of my credentials, and I don't propose to labour on my achievements to date. Instead, I want to focus on the challenges I faced and share my journey in getting to where I am today. the challenges came early. Okay, I went to a private school, attended a top university, achieved excellent grades, yet I still struggled to secure a training contract, a prerequisite for qualifying as a solicitor. Anyone who's ever applied for a training contract or is in the process of doing so will know that law is one of the most competitive professions to get into. I remember making dozens of applications to the large city firms, all the top national law firms, only to be faced with rejection. In fact, 2 firms which I applied to and got rejected from were actually predecessors of the firm that I'm now at, called Rag & Co and Lawrence Graham. Those 2 firms merged in 2014, and in 2016, Rag, Lawrence Graham & Co, as the combined firm was called, merged with Gowling's, which was one of Canada's largest law firms, to become Gowling WLG. I hope this just demonstrates that it's not the end of the world if you get those initial knockbacks. I'm now thriving at the very firms that I was rejected from all those years ago. Now, if you asked me at the time why I wasn't getting through, I wouldn't have been able to tell you. However, during lockdown, as with most people, I decided to have a bit of a clear out, and I actually came across some of my old training contract applications. When I look back at those applications, I understand why I didn't get through. There was nothing lacking in terms of my education or my achievements. I just didn't know how to sell myself on paper. And when it came to those group assessment centres, I just didn't thrive in those group exercise settings at the time. Some of this was partly due to social factors and a lack of experience. I didn't have lawyers or other professionals who had been through similar recruitment processes in the family, and I didn't seek out help as I didn't know who to turn to. And in fact, I never received any feedback from those law firms as to why I wasn't getting through. We also can't ignore the traditionally low proportions of Black, Asian and minority ethnic lawyers in UK law firms. While the numbers have slightly improved, the Solicitors Regulation Authority reported that BAME lawyers accounted for only 21% of all lawyers across the 96% of law firms that reported data to the SRA in 2019. Of those, 15% were Asian and 3% were Black. There is certainly no shortage of BAME applicants, and over the last few years, there has been an increased focus within firms and regulators, and not just in the legal sector, to improve those BAME numbers, especially in the senior leadership positions. Since the Black Lives Matter movement, there's been an even bigger spotlight on the barriers to entry for BAME candidates into the profession, and I am really encouraged by the efforts being made by firms today to challenge the status quo. Was the experience deflating? Absolutely. Did I give up? No. All those rejection letters gave me that drive and determination to succeed. They made me more resilient and more ambitious, and I really benefited from those early career trials and tribulations. My perseverance paid off, and I was successful in obtaining a training contract at a local commercial firm. Now, it was a far cry from the visions of being a big shot city lawyer, but honestly, it gave me the best grounding for my legal career. I was the only trainee in the firm, working directly with partners, and was exposed to some incredible work. For a small firm, they punched pretty hard. The managing partner advised leading charities, the corporate partner had spent years at a leading international law firm, and the litigation partner worked for some of the largest Midlands-based car manufacturers. While I heard stories of trainees at larger firms performing largely administrative tasks, I was preparing detailed instructions to counsel on highly complex matters and negotiating deals in corporate transactions. So then I completed my training contract there, and I actually secured a position as a corporate lawyer in the Birmingham office of a national law firm and moved there in 2007. As luck would have it, 2 years later, there was the credit crash. Overnight, corporate work dried up and there were mass redundancies across law firms. Unfortunately, my role was made redundant too. On the day that the redundancies were announced, I remember that I spent that afternoon making calls to several partners of other law firms who I had previously engaged with. And unsurprisingly for me, there were no jobs going at all. And believe me, it was a difficult and anxious time. I was just starting out in my career. I was being pigeonholed as a corporate lawyer, and there was absolutely no chance of getting employment at another law firm in that environment. So what did I do? Well, I applied for a working visa to Canada. I spent 6 months traveling around the Rockies, with the other 6 months based in Vancouver working for Deloitte. That was my first real insight into financial services. And when I returned to the UK, I applied to the financial services regulator, which, as you can imagine, was really busy in the aftermath of the Lehman Brothers and the credit crash. When what started off as a temporary 6-month contract led to an 8-year career at the regulator, the experience there was second to none. I worked my way up senior roles across its supervision and enforcement divisions. I reported directly to senior management and led on some of the highest profile investigations into some of the largest UK banks. After 8 years at the FCA, I felt the time had come to move on, and working there had really widened up my options. I could take my experience in-house and work in compliance or as general counsel for the very firms I regulated, go to work for the Big Four or other boutique compliance consultancies, or in fact move back in-house, back into private practice. Now, ultimately, I decided to move back into private practice and ended back up at Gowling's, which honestly has been an incredible move for me. Having been away from private practice for over 8 years, I was initially worried that would be on the back foot. I hadn't developed any external networks or built client relationships. I was working for the regulator, and being in such a public setting, you wouldn't be expected to do that. However, in just 2 years of being at the firm, I've managed to build my own professional brand, both internally and externally. And as soon as I joined, I immersed myself into business development activities, authoring articles, setting up meetings with key partners throughout the firm, putting myself forward for those complex pieces of work and pitches. As a result, I've featured as a commentator in the media, I've led on and won significant pitches, and I've had lots of work referred to me by colleagues across the firm and not just within the UK. Although my journey hasn't been smooth and life has thrown some unexpected curveballs, I'm sure I wouldn't be where I am today without having gone through each of those experiences. Now, COVID-19 has had a profound impact on the economy, with thousands of redundancies already announced. Over the next few months, as the furlough schemes and government funding come to an end, we may see further redundancies take place, and many of you watching today may feel really anxious about what the future holds. If there's one thing you should take away today, is that if you find yourself in such a position, then don't panic. My career to date has been bookended by the credit crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic. In a decade, we've seen 2 recessions, and there have been deeper and more severe recessions before then too. We've come out the other side in the past, and I'm optimistic that we will again. Yes, there will be tough times ahead, but it's not all doom and gloom. Not all sectors and industries are struggling. While retail has been hit hard on the high street, online sales are booming. While gyms were pre-packed before COVID, Peloton sales have gone through the roof, and for weeks into lockdown, you couldn't get hold of any home workout gym equipment. Whatever industry you're in, flush out all available opportunities. I knew back in 2009 that I had no hopes of getting a job in a law firm as a corporate lawyer, but with my transferable skills, could see that I had a lot to offer the regulator, which was heavily recruiting at the time. Look for those green shoots and silver linings, and most of all, don't lose that grit and determination in times of challenge.
Sushil, thank you so much. That was a very sincere and I think heartfelt speech you just made there. What I took from it was really, for somebody who's in the throes of their career success, having been bookended already by a career that begun in the liquidity crisis and has now reached its pinnacle in a health pandemic. You've really already seen the peaks, the troughs, the ups and downs, the cyclical nature of our economy. And I'm really pleased that you ended your speech there with a note of optimism, particularly on green shoots and on something that suggests light at the end of the tunnel. So thank you for that. And I think that's a very healthy segue to bring in Professor Paul Bhangal next, please. Paul, he has a veritable history in a number of sectors, being an experienced business professional with over 16 years of senior management experience in a number of multinationals. I was most impressed to see the information about Mercedes-Benz and him having P&L responsibilities there. But additionally to that, Paul is also very well versed in running multicultural teams, and he's delivered some very high-level consultancy projects across the globe in the EU, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia. In the recent 15 years, Paul has divided his time between higher education and business startups, however. His work in higher education has been in program development for a number of UK and overseas universities, in managing entrepreneurships with premier institutions that cater for young and mature learners from all over the globe. He often gets invited to deliver keynote speeches and has delivered them around the UK and in China. And also, I've heard that his keynotes have taken him as far as Finland, France, India, Japan, Oman, and Qatar. So really, some notable opportunities there to have heard Paul deliver his recipe for success in the past. He has now set up his own college in the City of London, and he's been on the advisory board of 2 blue chip organizations. He's the advisor to an edutech company in Tokyo and has recently expanded its operations in the USA. And his pastimes and interests include the arts, and of which he's the fellow of the Royal Society of Arts and has held a number of art exhibitions in London. So he has that to his string of assets as well. Paul, if we could leave the floor to you to give us your recipe for success.
Thank you for the introduction. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm a bit, I apologize if there seems to be a bit of an echo. That's primarily due to the fact I'm in a room with very thick walls and quite high ceiling here in central London. I did want a quieter room around the back, but there's builders doing some renovation work around the back at the moment. To avoid the noise, I came to the front of the building. Yes, I think through all the challenges that tends to happen in life is that you've just got to get on with things. And I'm sure, whether people are quite doing well in their careers or they're not doing well in their careers, people always come across hurdles, brick walls. You have to fight your way through. But I always believe that if you're passionate about something, you will get past it. But there is a distinct, I think there's a distinct divide between what you're really passionate about and what you need to do in reality. So, for example, if you're interested in the arts and you are an IT person, right? If you're good at IT, work your way up, get promotion, get a good career, but there's nothing stopping you to do something in the arts in your spare time. You don't have to make a career out of your passion. What you can do is use it as a hobby or use it as a passion. So, you do well in one industry and make sure that your passion stays separate from that industry. And that can work very, very well. I do photography and filming and things like that. So, that's my passion, but that doesn't mean I need to go and work in that industry. But however, you mentioned about transitioning from one job to another. Most people don't know this, but actually I started off as a medical student here in London at King's College, because I was led to believe by my father that I wanted to be a doctor. He said, "You're going to be a doctor." I said, "Am I?" "Yes, first doctor in our family." I said, "Oh, okay." But I was always led to believe I should be a doctor. And I ended up at King's College. And soon after medical school, unfortunately, he passed away very early at the age of 57. And I took a year out just to help my mom, and I've got a couple of younger siblings. But during that time, I realized I didn't like medicine at all. You've got to be passionate, like many of the great doctors and nurses we've got in the country. You've got to be passionate looking after people, and you've got to have that inside you. And I didn't have that inside me. I wanted something a bit more fun, a bit more glamorous. Basically, what I wanted was a fancy car, free of charge. As a poor student, I didn't have the money to buy a car. So I thought, why don't I go and work for a car company and just give me a company car? And that's basically what I did. After a lot of telling off from my mother saying, "Why aren't you back at college?" But I stuck it out. And because I enjoyed it and I was passionate, and I went from one company to another, in the end, I ended up as in senior management in Mercedes-Benz company. And I was driving all these fancy cars that people normally dream of. So, and free of charge as well. you know. So that was the best bit about it. So I went from the medical side to the auto industry, and only somebody said to me, if you want to be a director in Mercedes-Benz, you know, in Germany, you've got to have one of these things called an executive MBA, which I didn't know what it was, but I ended up doing an executive MBA, but I enjoyed the experience so much at university, I ended up staying there. And a few years later, here I am. You know, I've seen some good things happening at universities, and I've seen some bad things happening at universities. People say they're becoming more like businesses, and some of them are. There's some excellent academics and who really enjoy teaching, but some of the universities are there just to pay their bills and make a profit, which now, due to COVID, I think they're really suffering because some of them are not cash rich, you know, like the elite ones. So, you know, in the end, I've taken some of the good parts of what goes on in business, what goes on in universities, and I thought, you know what, I think I could do better. So I opened my own college here in central London. We've got, you know, anything up to, we've got about 12, 15 full-time staff and about 40 freelancers, and they're from all over the country, from Cambridge, Oxford, UCL, King's College, Warwick, and they work with us, and it's great. It's worked out great, but it's all about time. So any young people or anyone looking to progress in their career, my only advice to them would be, is don't expect things to happen just straight away or tomorrow. You know, all the good things in life, like cheese and wine and things like that, you know, they take time to mature. You know, give it time. Don't put too much pressure on yourself that you need to be super successful very, very quickly, and you'll get there. But keep your head held up high and keep your passion going. But above all, stay fit and healthy, because that's what's going to take you to success.
Cool. Thank you very much indeed. You began your speech there creating a small divide between what you call passion and reality, and then you talked to us about how your reality turned into some of your passions. I took away from it your message to our listeners to make sure they use their downtime effectively, to keep their head held up high, and to give themselves the luxury to take patience to mature like a fine wine or like a cheese, and not to be in such a rush to reach their pinnacle of success, because as you've put it with your own formula and your own recipe, it's a lifelong journey and they should savor every moment of it. So thank you, Paul. We will absolutely come back to you. I can see some comments already coming through in my chat window with some questions at the end of it directed to you. So if you could bear with us, we'll be back with you shortly with some questions. I'd like to introduce Bimmy Rai next, whose story and biography really fascinated me as I was following it. Bimmy is a project manager, a trainer, coach and mentor, having worked in the education and not-for-profit sector for over 25 years. And that's what probably a number of you have heard and read about Bimmy from the communique we've already given. But Bimmy was born in Ludhiana, India, where her parents settled in the Midlands when they moved here, and that's where her schooling and her career started. She's been known throughout her career for her leadership skills, and she went on to work as a manager in journalism for the BBC, in social action broadcasting, before diversifying her senior management and media career into important fields such as domestic abuse, electronic publishing, and managing educational projects. She's a qualified teacher, an assessor, and a governor, and she's been supporting businesses and individuals in the areas of systems, policies, growth, and human resources over recent years. Most impressively, she spent 10 years as the CEO of an award-winning BAME network, where she was the champion of diverse communities within Derby and across the East Midlands. She attracted investment in the field of health, social care, and mental health, whilst also increasing community engagement through that role. Bimmy is currently the business support manager for a national training organisation which seeks to combat gender violence. And it's against that very illustrious journey that Bimmy's had that I'd like to open the floor to her and invite her to share with us her antidote for success. So Bimmy, if you could take the floor.
Thank you very much for that very nice intro, Chet. And my thanks to City Sikhs as well for this wonderful opportunity to be able to come and be part of the distinguished panels and experts that we've got here today, just to kind of share my story. I just want to give the backdrop about how, while we have a professional context in which we're talking, I think it's really important to understand that our personal circumstances actually have a huge impact on our future progression. And I came from a working background in a very poor part of Derby. So I'm an inner-city lass, and I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of the heritage of working very closely with those early BAME neighbours, where deprivation was an issue. You know, I saw my parents' school, who came here with very high aspirations, and actually the country at the time was not geared up to be able to provide the kind of opportunities that, you know, we hear about, the street being paved with gold, and this kind of assumption that this country won't be able to answer their dreams, their aspirations. I didn't see that with my parents, saw my parents struggle. I also struggled while having lost my parents when I was young. I also had barriers in terms of, you know, sort of dealing with issues around depression, especially in young people. The early 80s were we lived under the Thatcherite era, so we understood a lot about, you know, the challenges and how were we going to be able to break through when we've got miners' strikes going. There was no hot dinners at school, and how do we kind of in that environment try and forge kind of a mindset for success for the future, where actually all you see around you is difficulties. So, you know, it's a particularly challenging mindset when, you know, there's low aspiration within the neighbourhood, within the community itself, and also within, you know, the employment sector as well. I mean, Derby's very well known for its manufacturing, but anything above that, it was a case of, you know, where do you go in terms of your career? You know, this is a conversation about being London-centric, or having a silver spoon in your mouth, or having an entity where your parents have already provided for you a platform from with which you can springboard and talk about the kind of success where you are having fight in terms of survival. Okay, I was tenacious in my personality. I know that my personality, I feel, possibly had a lot to do with not taking no for an answer. I actually, you know, a young person, suffered from depression after losing my parents and having to have responsibility looking after my family members and all the duties that come with, you know, having to try and support a family as well as look to yourself. So I was doing 3 or 4 jobs a day, you know, just to try and sign, pay mortgage, just get by through what I would call my day-to-day survival. That is really important, and for me, that is success. For me, the academia and everything else is a bonus. Just to be able to put food on your table and to be able to create the kind of support network around you that mean that you could find a safety net when there wasn't, and is really important. And that's part of my message, is that when you are struggling, my question to you is, who is your support network? Where is your safety net? A lot of the time people fall through the loop. I actually sourced mentors, and I also tried to create goals that were, I mean, I'm a project manager, so, you know, let's talk about SMART targets now. You know, SMART means, you know, being specific, measurable, having achievable, realistic and time goals. I had a strategic plan for 5 years, but actually, in the grand scheme of things, I had to go back to basics and create goals that would be manageable. So, you know, I started off in social act broadcasting. I went volunteer at my local radio station because I wanted to get involved in journalism. And I got a no. I was rejected by the group of people that I looked up to, who I thought would be able to open up a door for me. Did that stop me? No. You know, I used that as the fire to say, okay, well, if I get a rejection here, I'll just look somewhere else. And I managed to get on a training scheme. I did the training scheme for a year. Within a year of that, I was at the same radio station working for the BBC, and that's how I started my career in social broadcasting, becoming a manager. The other reality is that certainly in the non-profit sector, you know, we are independent, funding projects, closed, open. 3 years is kind of a standard maximum for projects. So it was really important to have a flexible mindset and to understand that we may need to skill up in other areas. And that's been part of my journey, is to understand that for survival as well as skilling up, it's important to remain flexible. You know, I've been made redundant several times, so I understand what it's like. And I did a brick wall, which meant that I had to completely review. I'd got to the top of my game, and it's like, where do I go from here? I had some lateral moves. My lateral moves across meant I had to go back to study. You know, I decided to go into teaching. So therefore, through diversifying, being flexible, and also be kind to yourself. It's about, you know, aspirations and expectations by family about, you know, what roles do we play. But it's really important to understand we really need to be kind to ourselves when it comes to the expectations that we put upon ourselves, and make sure that even if we feel like we're failing, you know, it's okay. You know, it didn't work out today, but we live to fight another day. And so kindness is really important as sort of health and well-being. You may not get there straight up. It may take a while. You may never get there where your route intended in a certain direction. And that's my life story, is that I had visions of being a professor of psychology when I was years old. That's what my dream was. And my reality, something completely different. You know, the way the life dealt me the cost that it did meant that I had completely, you know, re-strategize about how am I going to be able to do what I need to do in terms of life and try and achieve. So I would say to you, as part of kind of recipes for success, surround yourself with mentors in different shapes, sizes, forms, you know, and they all offer different things. Surround yourself with the people that you can hand off to, people that you can trust. And it's a really important part of the journey to be able to talk through those challenges. You don't need to fight it all on your own. So I would say, you know, be flexible, be prepared to diversify, volunteer. Volunteering was one of the most, and especially in terms of career as well. If you want to really know what you want to get into, volunteer. Volunteer in the not-for-profit sector is one of the most rich experiences you can get, because you can really understand whether that's a sector that you want to go to as well. So I would support, you know, any kind of volunteering opportunities you get, and don't give up. You know, keep your goal manageable, bite-sized, and you know, for me, I think the issue is that, you know, from survival, we then get to thrive as a result of that. And that's been my journey in terms of kind of how I've got to where I have. And, you know, to achieve a fellowship from the RSA a couple of years ago, you know, was for me a wonderful recognition of the effort that you can achieve in life. We're not all setting out to be fellows, but it's wonderful when that time comes, you know. But I'm grateful for the journey. I am who I am as a result of that, and I am grateful that I can share some of my experience with you.
Bimmy, thank you very much indeed, and that's most appreciated. I mean, I took from what you said that your personal circumstances have had such a tremendous impact on your life journey, including those ups and downs, those peaks and troughs, and much of what you said really, I think, resonates closely with Sushil's opening remarks as well. But you spoke of tenacity, as did Sushil, not taking no for an answer. Indeed, you had 4 jobs per day. You were working 4 jobs a day at one point in your career, and that's not dissimilar to the pace at which Paul also moved through his careers as well. But you returned to education at one point in your career, and so did Paul. And I see that as an emerging theme where at some point in every successful person's career, they return to educate themselves to that next level in order to break through any ceiling. You said it's important for us to have mentors and people who you can put your trust into, and I completely concur with that that advice. And the last thing that struck me was your very sincere note of the emotional investment you've put into members from the BAME community within your hometown, supporting them through their depression and other emotional challenges, and that takes a tremendous amount of courage. And so, on behalf of the City Sikh Network, we recognise that and thank you for all that you do and continue to do. It's a very welcome segue, I think, to our final panelist as well, Savita Kaye. I really enjoyed researching on your pedigree, Savita, because it's something that I'm unfamiliar with, being in professional advisory or financial services. But you're the founder of the House of iKons and its CEO, supporting and promoting emerging creatives on your global platform. I found a quote that you had, something that you had said in the media, which really I found impressive. You said you pushing diversity in every way from ethnic backgrounds, be it size, shape, height, and age, is part of your ethos. We will continue each season highlighting beauty and creativity, not just in design and music, but for all, regardless of their color, their ethnicity, their size, their shape, and their sexual orientation. Everyone has a right to feel and look good, to feel confident about who they are here and now. Everyone has that right, and will continue to push boundaries and stereotypes at the House of iKons. We're still a small drop in this big ocean, but we will continue to create that storm and bring beauty and creativity to whoever you are, wherever you are around the world. And I thought that was a very, very powerful message for you to give as the ambassador of your organization. I was also interested to see that the House of iKons are one of the top 6 brands that represent innovative voices of fashion around the world on WikiWid. You've highlighted beauty and creativity, and your team continue to showcase their icons and shake the pillars of the fashion industry with every move you make. So with that very brief introduction to you, Savita, I would like you to take the floor and educate us more on your recipe for personal and professional success.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. So it sounds like the ending of a beautiful fairy tale, what you've just said. Actually, I used to work for Lloyds Banking Group for 14 years in group security and fraud. And as you know, when Lehman Brothers collapsed, Halifax collapsed 2 days later, and we got gobbled up by Lloyds Banking Group. But while we were being taken over, unfortunately, I was going through a very abusive marriage and had a very young child. So as well as dealing with the pressures from work, I was also dealing with a lot of abuse at home. So with that, the divorce came through. I wasn't very happy with my job role, where I was situated. And I started writing as a journalist for many magazines, and also as an investigative journalist. And I've had to put my hat back on just recently following a suicide murder case, which I'm sure you probably all know what I'm talking about. So I attended many events with my film crew, etc., and I attended many fashion events. And I then wanted to challenge myself, and I was still working for Lloyds Banking Group at the time, to do my own small fashion show. And we worked with the Prince's Trust at the time. This was in September 2013. It was a very small production. And because of the contacts that I had made in, being a journalist, I just called them all up. I said, oh, please come and support a fellow journalist and come and attend my show. And they said, well, of course, we'll do some pre-press releases for you, to really push your show out there. And I went, thank you. The great thing is the network. I had a fantastic network. They came, they watched the show, they gave me post press releases afterwards. And from that tiny little show I did, our show and our designers were picked up by the likes of Rihanna and Paris Hilton. One of our designers got picked up and ended up designing for the House of Louis Vuitton in London. And about 4 different designers from that particular show actually sold off the runway. So the next day, me and my team just sat there and scratched our heads and thought, what did we do so different? Because obviously, you know, we're dealing with, you know, the big fashion giant, which is British Fashion Council and Fashion Scout. And what we did is that we promoted every single designer months before the show. So I sat with my team and I said, I really need to change the name of the show. It was called Angels of Fashion. It didn't sit right in my gut. And I discussed with my team. I said, I want my creatives to come home. I want them to feel warm and comfortable, a family environment. You can tell I'm Indian when I say family environment, you know, and to open doors around the world for them. And this is where the name House of iKons was created. And the big K in iKons actually represents my surname Kay, and that wasn't my doing. That was actually my operations director, God bless him. He passed away in 2016, and he said, Savita, this was your idea, and we need to let everyone know that this is your concept. So hence the House of iKons was created in September 2014. We've launched in 8 cities around the world. And our designers have moved on and they've worked through our platform with Michelle Obama, Beyonce, Jennifer Lopez, and the list just goes on. But it hasn't just been our creatives that have done extremely well. It's been our music artists we've launched. Also the hosts of our shows, even our models, they've ended up being published in Vogue and Harper's Bazaar magazine. It's been a tough journey because from a personal and emotional side, I've had to deal with an abusive marriage, the divorce, the collapse of that, as well as trying to protect my son and fight for my son in court against my abusive partner. So this was all going on while I was creating House of iKons. Using this platform, I also went on record in September 2017 during London Fashion Week about domestic violence. I told my story. And we did this through fashion and music. We had the head of the Metropolitan Police in the audience, sitting front row VIP, with some top legal barristers in this country who do specialize in domestic violence. And they said they've never seen something like this about domestic violence presented in such a way. And that show alone, on the day of that show, 50 women came forward that day. And what surprised and shocked me, it wasn't just, you know, people from the audience, but it was some of my designers, my models and my makeup artists. They had no idea how we were going to open the show. And they were messaging me, and there was one young model whose name I will not mention, but she said to me, we were waiting backstage to walk for the very first designer, and you spoke about your story. She said, all I've had is noise in my head constantly. And she said, I didn't feel normal, you know, standing with all my colleagues, the other models, I felt abnormal because her partner wanted to cut her up into little pieces. This is what she was going through. These were the threats she was going through. And she said, you talking about your own experience, she said, I felt healed. I felt that someone is speaking on my behalf. So when I went on stage that day, I said, even if I help one person, then the abuse that I went through, I can take the silver lining from it because I have helped that one person. With these 50 women, I was working behind the scenes after the show to point them in the right direction, to get legal help, support, housing, etc. So we were working behind the scenes supporting them. So I'm using this platform in every way. I feel, that, there is a much bigger social responsibility out there than looking pretty in designer clothes. The other thing is also from a mental health point of view. It's, if you dress up or do your hair, like for today, it was the first time I put on, did my hair and makeup since March, since lockdown. But, when you do small things like that, it makes you feel good. You feel confident. And my argument with the whole fashion industry, and I go live, we live stream the show worldwide. I challenge all the big 4 fashion weeks and I challenge every single brand. They are designing for very, very skinny people. Women have a beautiful shape. Let's celebrate it. But the emotional impact it's having on women, they're starving themselves. You're looking at eating disorders. They may be going through something in their life which has got nothing to do with looks or fashion, but they may want to dress up and they'll look what's going on in the media. I can't look as good as that. And then that brings them down even further. So I'm always saying that the fashion industry holds the biggest social responsibility on mental health and how we feel about each other and about ourselves. Hence the reason we do not look at colour of skin, we do not look at religion, we do not look at size and shape, or gender, or sexual orientation. We've had, we've had transsexuals, transgenders on our runway, we've had binary on our runway, gender fluid on our runway, and we have embraced them all because they are all beautiful and they do a brilliant job gracing the runway. Hence the reason we're one of the top 6 global brands in the world, being called the innovative voices of fashion. So I want to make sure that our designers are seen, but also heard as well. Now, very quickly, I know we're running out of time, but with COVID-19, we can't do the live show in September. And yes, that impacted me, it impacted my designers and my other clients. So we are looking at different ways of getting brands, products, services out there. And we have focused, obviously, all online. So we are doing a digital show in September this year to help all creatives across the board. And it's called the Intimate Insight into the World of Our iKons. So this gives a more of a personal feel between the global audience and the designers directly. We have designers from all over the world participating, and I want the world to understand not the pretty execution of the runway clothes, but the labor of love behind the scenes. And every creative and every designer has a story to tell. Some of their background stories and their struggles, I will not lie to you, and I'm not ashamed in admitting this, I've actually broke down crying. My struggles are nothing in comparison to what they've gone through and what they are going through and what they've been subjected to. So if my platform can help them and heal them and give them that exposure and also the recognition they truly deserve, then I am so honored and grateful. That's it.
Thank you very much indeed. I took an awful lot from that actually, and it was a heartening speech you made. What begun for an abusive marriage and the care and love for your son, the story of domestic violence, resulted in such a powerful and innovative showcase of the talent that you put forward at various shows and events to galvanize 50 victims coming forward in one evening to come and seek your counsel and support. And that's a very powerful use of your brand. Your brand clearly is using fashion to provide that platform for a wider societal service. And I think that is the most important learning I took from what you said. Not only that, but it fits so comfortably with the City Sikh Network's purpose. And I began today's seminar by saying, we're here to build a cohesive and inclusive society in which individuality is respected and diversity celebrated. Now that is the very purpose embedded in the constitution of the City Sikh Network. And it seems like the House of iKons resonates to that purpose completely. I'm intrigued to know more about the investigative journalist career, and I might ask you that offline. But that is not to close any topic of discussion from question now, which is the segment that we move on to with the last minutes to spare in today's session. I was blessed that offline we received a number of questions before we came into today's segment. The questions are very nicely segmented. I think that they can be addressed to each of our panelists in turn. So I will begin immediately by asking Paul, please, if you could give us just a sentence or two for those who are looking forward to having a successful career. What's your recommendation that they get work experience, varied work experience like you did, or go back to university like you did? Which of those two in the balance is the most important for them?
I get asked that question quite a lot by young adults, and what I usually say to them is that it depends on their personal or their family's financial circumstances, because if the circumstances are tough and finances are difficult, I always suggest that they should try and get work experience, get the work experience, get into a job, start earning some money, right? Reduce those financial burdens, because the university will always be there. Thankfully, these days, people can do part-time study, evening study. They can do it much later in life. So that's what I say to them. But if finance is okay and your parents are supporting you, then yes, having an education is great. It's a wonderful experience, and it's going to stay with you, for the rest of your life. So check out what your priorities are. Don't jump in just checking what everybody else is doing.
So this is a question of what you can financially stretch to at the time. Savita, it leads me to a question I want to address to you. It's also about finances, actually, and it sits within a context of a healthcare pandemic. But how can one starting out a new enterprise promote their brand in a way that's cost effective against a backdrop of paid promotions on social media and lots of expense involved in advertising, etc.? How do we do that as entrepreneurs in a cost-effective manner?
One thing one would need to invest in is a website, but while you are building the all singing and dancing website, is to actually promote your product, your service, your brand via social media. Now, we all know social media is so powerful and so strong. You have people who are, on the Instagram influencers, and they make crazy amounts of money. So as long as you are constantly promoting on social media platforms, understand the hashtags as well, because if you go onto Google and state, okay, the most trending hashtag in, say, finance, it will come up with the top 30 hashtags to use. And these change like every 4 to 6 weeks. Also, if you Google what is the best time to actually post, whether it be on Facebook or Instagram, etc., and state your location, regardless where you are around the world, it'll actually tell you the best time to actually promote is on such and such day at such and such time. So last time I looked was Wednesday, 6 o'clock in the evening. Another thing is that Instagram has got, if you've turned your Instagram from personal into business, it gives you all the analytics as well. So use that. So that's very helpful. Now, if you're more into the creative side, like, your makeup artists, photographers, etc., what they do generally tend to do is that they do TFP shoots, so time for print. So nobody's charged anything. They work together collectively, free of charge, and everybody gets something out of it. The designer gets something out of it, the model does, the makeup artist and the photographer. So it helps build their portfolio. So again, it's a cost-effective way and efficient way of actually, creating either a beautiful portfolio or some beautiful images to post on social media.
Okay. All right. So there's an awful lot that came out of that answer, which spoke to brands. And I've had a question, Sushil, which I want to address to you, please, which is about professional brands. And now that we're working from home and we're practicing social distancing as a result of the pandemic, how do we continue to build our personal brand and our professional networks effectively? And we've got all of 3 minutes to answer it. So if you could take a minute and a half, because I do have one question that I want to end with Bimmy on.
Yeah, so that's a great question. What I would suggest is that, just because we're working from home doesn't mean that you can't, enhance your profile remotely. LinkedIn is an excellent resource. I use it. I'm a great advocate for it. I author articles for my firm and external publications. I reach out to my key client base through social media as well. We act for some of the largest organizations out there. I track what they're doing on social media. I reach out to my contacts at those and say, you know what, I'm loving what you're doing at the moment. It's just about, sort of getting, encouraging and those relationships and building up those rapport. It is a difficult environment, no doubt about that. But there are different ways that you can reach out. LinkedIn, I think, if you're starting out, is definitely a great resource. You should start by not just focusing on your firm's brand, but creating your own personal brand, your own professional brand. and then just, you know, trying to seek out those opportunities that you can by using those different avenues again. And, you know, you can reach out to even your colleagues internally, so reach out to other partners, check in with them how they're doing, you know, just reach out to your client base as often as you can. Doesn't mean that just because you're not sat in an office, you're not with your colleagues, doesn't mean that you should not be prevented from sort of reaching out. And I think that would be appreciated as well by most in the current climate.
Okay. And Bimmy, I want to ask you this. It's been in the back of my mind since I heard your speech. The advice that you would give to a young person if they're starting out on their career ladder and they're unsure about what move to make in the subtext of a recession that's looming.
Yes, I think that it's really key to understanding where the value is in terms of what employers are looking for. The challenge is always between now balancing, you know, at one point a good degree was all that was required. In my experience, actually, when it comes to the interview experience, being able to have a CV that shows that you've been able to be mentored, to actually go and work on projects, actually broker conversations with not-for-profit charities where you can go and volunteer your time, working on projects and skilling up, actually where for me the value is. I have a couple of students I'm mentoring, and whilst they're in the education system, I'm actually saying to that they need to go into a sector. There is an organisation that wouldn't say no to additional support and help, but what you will get back in turn is the skills that you can tangibly show with an interview process when people are asking you questions about, you know, how did you find it, what impact did you make, and so on. You've actually got some real rich context to talk about. So I would encourage anyone in this COVID era as well to really value the opportunities to volunteer and to support, and that can happen online as well. There's a whole shift towards doing a lot of the work and engaging electronically and virtually. So, you know, the charitable sector has those opportunities. So I'd certainly encourage them to sign up with your local volunteer bureau or a council for voluntary services or a youth charity where those opportunities are available, and they can also give you training and also any financial support if you do experience some need of any sort of financial kind. They can support you with travel reimbursements and so on. So just get volunteering is my motto.
Thank you, Bimmy, and that brings us to a close this evening. One thing I'd like to say to everybody who's been watching and listening attentively, thank you for your emails, your questions, etc. offline. There was a great wealth of information we received from our panelists this evening. You will not be able to digest and absorb all of that in one sitting. There's no doubt about that. To weave all of that knowledge together and create a formula, a recipe for success will require you to watch this back at least another occasion. And so I'd like to remind you all that not only were we broadcasting this evening over Zoom, but also tonight's broadcast was filmed and was on YouTube, will be on YouTube for you to rewatch back over time to come. Please log on to the City Sikhs YouTube channel. That's citysikh.org.uk is their website, and they've got a YouTube channel where you can watch this back this evening again. To close, thank you, Savita Kaye. Thank you, Sushil Kuner. Thank you, Professor Paul Bhangal. Thank you, Bimmy Rai. Thank you to the City Sikh Network. My name's Chet Behl, and you've been wonderful to listen to. This is the Recipe for Success 2020.